Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is another episode of the Azure Community Standup. I'm your host, Byron Tardif, and with me today I have Jordan, who's going to be talking to us everything about app service environments and migrating off of the older versions. Jordan, do you want to say hi, introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me here today. Hello, everyone. My name is Jordan Selig. I'm a PM with App Service. I focus on a bunch of things for the product, including app service environments, some networking features, a CLI, some security work with policy.
Yep.
So thank you for having me.
Yeah, that's kind of like a common thread where we're spread all over a bunch of different features, and ACE being the big one for you. So before we dive into the ACE migration story, just quick reminders. Build just happened last 2 weeks ago. We had a great session there. Don't worry about the links. We'll share all of those in the App Service blog. But here's a great session if you want to catch up on the latest, greatest, what's new. Tulika, Butang, Gaurav, they did a great session where we're talking about all of the story of from migrating your app to like hosting an app in production and all of the different opportunities for you to add AI to it. It can be applied when you're migrating the app using things like Copilot Assistant or GitHub Copilot to tell you about the code changes that you can do to prevent issues that you would have during migration, to modernizing and like a classic ASP.NET app to have GenAI connections and talking to OpenAI in the backend, to building something that is similar to RAG, where you have things like web jobs on Linux, doing the augmentation and vector lookup using vector databases and all of that stuff. This is a great session to watch, and it highlights some of the new features that we're working on, like sidecars, web jobs, elastic scaling, load testing, everything. Great session, very dense. Go check it out. Okay, with that out of the way, we can dive directly into the demos. So I'll share your screen, Jordan. Is that okay?
Of course, yep.
Okay, here we go. So tell us about ACE and why do I need to migrate and what's this all about?
So for those of you that are not familiar, App Service Environment, we like to call it ACE for short, just because App Service Environment is a long name. So ACE is our single tenant offering for App Service. Essentially, you get all the compute, all the resources to yourself. There's nothing shared there. So this is something a lot of our highly regulated or large enterprise customers gravitate towards, just because they have certain compliance requirements that require single tenant isolation. With ACEs, you also get significantly greater scale than with our multi-tenant offering. So this is just something else that some of our larger customers need, and it's one of the reasons why they will go there.
Yeah. So on like the public stamps, when I create an app service plan, I'm getting that compute that's dedicated, but I'm sharing things like the front ends. And in the ACEs, even the front ends are dedicated, right? So that's the publishing endpoints. Everything is, so it's like having your own little mini stamp.
Exactly, and there's some pros and cons to that. You really have to decide whether you want that single tenant isolation. There's things like scaling that may take a bit longer because of that isolation. We do have to allocate resources to individual customers, and it can be a bit more expensive to use an ACE. So things like that are things you have to evaluate when deciding between ACE and our multi-tenant offering. But ACE definitely has a lot of benefits that a lot of customers definitely like using.
Cool.
So today's discussion is going over migration, and the reason we're talking about migration is because App Service Environment has 3 versions: version 1, version 2, and version 3. Version 1 and version 2 are old. They've been around for a number of years, and they run on Cloud Services Classic, which is underlying infrastructure that Azure has decided to retire. This announcement was made about 3 years ago, and with that announcement, we also announced the retirement of ACE v1 and v2. ACE v3, the latest version, runs on VMSS, Virtual Machine Scale Sets, which is the latest and greatest offering from Azure, and is the future of what they see our compute to run on. So with that, we need all of our customers that are on ACE V1 and V2 to migrate to V3. That would probably be the easiest path. Obviously, if V3 is not the right solution for you, or if you were looking to move towards another service within Azure, this is your time to do that. But we highly recommend moving to ACE V3 because it is the easiest path, and you'll have the fewest changes when it comes to your apps and infrastructure. We've tried to achieve parity when it comes to your apps running on the older versions and ACE V3. So we've done everything we can to make the migration as seamless as possible. That's what I want to talk about today.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing to call out is that this is not just we're not just telling you, customer, to go do this. We had to do this ourselves. Like the whole app service fleet migrated from being on cloud services to being on VMSS. That's something that we did over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
There was a lot of learnings from that. So we're not doing this blind, right? There's definitely some guidance, and we know all the places where we need to handhold you to do that migration, and that's basically what Jordan's been doing for the last couple of years.
And I think one thing to call out as well is if you were using our multi-tenant offering, we did this whole migration in the background for you. It was silent. There was no downtime. With ACE, you have to initiate this migration yourself because it is a re-platform. There's things like IP address changes that will happen when we do this re-platform. And because of that, we couldn't do this on your behalf because obviously, like, if you don't account for these new IPs, your apps are going to break.
And business continuity, especially because ACEs are very much, they're all about VNets and connecting to corporate resources. So that is very sensitive.
Exactly. So, one of the reasons why we need you to do this migration, we've given customers notice for the last 2.5 years, and we're down. I don't know if I mentioned the end of life is August 31st this year. So you have less than 90 days to complete this migration if you haven't already started or started planning it. You have about 90 days left. So definitely pay attention to what we're talking about today. And we also have a number of resources that can help you get moving quickly and efficiently.
Yeah, and we've already had a significant number of customers migrate, but there's always people that leave it to the last minute. And what we're trying to tell you is don't leave it to the last minute. It's not just, click and you're done. There's a little bit more than that.
Yeah, and the migration tooling that we're going to be going over today, like, it can help you speed up these migrations. A migration could take less than a day if you follow our instructions and use the automated tooling. So it's definitely possible to complete this work within the next 90 days. It's just a matter of you, getting started, learning about it, and doing it. Yeah. So with that, if there's no other questions, Byron, from your side, we can go right into what migration looks like.
Yeah, I think no questions right now, but just a reminder for the people watching the live stream, we answer questions live, so just throw them in there, whether you're watching on YouTube or Twitch, put them there. If you're on Twitter, you can also @ me, and I'll bring the question in for Jordan to answer live.
All right. Yeah, so with that, I just wanted to show everyone what migration looks like and what we have to offer in terms of automated tooling. So right here, what we're looking at is just an ACE V2. It's just a demo ACE V2. It's empty. I spun this up a couple days ago for the demo here. But because this is an ACE V2, it will need to get migrated to V3 unless I delete it before the end of life in August. So the way you would do that from the portal, we have a nice migration option in the TOC on the left-hand side. And doing that will take you to our migration experience. And the first thing you'll see is that we're showing two options, an in-place and a side-by-side. And I will go into more details about the differences between these two in a bit and explain what's happening there. But just the first thing to note here is that an in-place migration is the simplest solution. It's where we replace your existing ACE in the same subnet. This comes with about 1 hour of downtime because a subnet can only have a single ACE, and we need to clean up all the old resources before we can spin up the new resources. So in place is the simplest solution, but it does involve downtime. If you can't have any downtime with your apps, then we have other solutions for you. And our other solution is a side-by-side migration. So this one's a little trickier because it involves configuring another subnet, which means you have to make sure that the two subnets that you have can talk to each other and all the networking components are right, and that anything you need for your ACE v3 is already set up before you start the migration. Otherwise, you'll have some sort of downtime or outage once the migration is complete. But with the side-by-side migration, we're able to achieve 0 downtime, and that's because we create your new ACE v3 in this subnet that you identify at the same time that your existing ACE is running. And we only initiate the traffic cutover and deletion of the ACE v2, the old ACE, once you tell us. And this is another 0 downtime process, that cutover. So side-by-side may be right for you if you can't support downtime, and if you do have room for an additional subnet and some additional networking configuration. Yeah. So
I could be running like hundreds of apps within an ACE. This takes care of the app side as well as the ACE part, right? Like
exactly. This takes care of everything. Okay. Right. So we strongly push customers to use these automated options because it does takes care of all of the app service plan and app recreation in the new ACE. If you were to go with a manual migration option, which is obviously something like spinning up an ACE on your own, you'd have to recreate all your app service plans, recreate all your apps, test everything, configure all the networking, and it would be in a completely separate subnet, maybe a potentially different VNet. You have to reconfigure all of your networking components. It's definitely possible. We have ways that you can simplify that process. We have, some automation in terms of like backup restore, cloning, just things to make like the app copying process a little quicker. But you still need to provision the ACE. You still need to set it up, and things may not go your way if you're doing everything manually. So we highly recommend an automated process.
Yeah, so basically try to start with one of the automated processes, and if that doesn't work, fall back to manual, but don't go manual from the start.
Exactly. And we do have a decision tree. It's in one of the links that we'll share after this presentation today. And the decision tree goes through exactly, will one of the automated solutions work for you? And it helps you decide between which of those solutions, either the in-place or the side-by-side, is good for you. And if you don't meet the criteria, then, you go ahead with the manual option. We've done some, analysis, and we believe that the automated options support over 98% of the existing ACEs out there. So there's a very small chance that you won't be able to use our automation. And we're proud of that statistic. We've worked really hard to get us to that point. So we hope it works for you.
Awesome.
So with that, I'm just going to take us over to PowerPoint. I prepared some slides to go into some more detail about how the migrations work. Present this and minimize this. All right. So just to reiterate, we have 3 migration options: the in-place, the side-by-side, and a manual migration. I'm not going to go into the details of a manual migration because if you're familiar with ACE, you know how to spin up an ACE at this point because you already did it for your old ACEs, so you just have to recreate that process for your ACE v3. But I want to go in detail about in-place and side-by-side just because the concepts are a little tricky, and some customers, they want to see the visuals. So I put that together today in some very low-tech animations. So breeze over this. All right, so the first thing we're going to look at is in-place migration. So this migration is where we use the same subnet. So your existing infrastructure will look like this. You'll have your front ends, your back ends. You'll note that I have the back ends. It says RDFE there. That's our internal name for Cloud Service Classic, which is the old infrastructure that's retiring.
It's the Red Dog front end. Red Dog being the code name for Azure before it was a product.
Exactly. We like to have cool code names for all of our internal, all of our products there.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is my ACE as it is. I want to migrate this to v3. I'm using the in-place migration feature. So what I would do is I would start the process, which the first thing it does is it deletes all of your ACE v2 or old ACE resources. And because of that, for a period of time, you will have an empty subnet. You will not have any apps. You will have downtime. This process takes about an hour or so. And then simply, before we deleted everything, we copied everything that was, needed to be copied. We spin up your ACE v3, and that's it. It's a very simple process. And because of that, not much can go wrong. And it's why we push customers to use this option when they're trying to migrate. You do have to know that there are IP changes. So we give you the IPs up front before you initiate this process. You can account for those new IPs, update your DNS, firewalls, NSGs, whatever you need to update. We let you do that up front before you start this process so that when you do it, immediately once the ACE v3 comes online, it'll start serving traffic, and downtime is minimal.
Right.
So that's it. That's in place. This solution's been around for, I think, over 2 years now, 2.5 years, and it's been used by a lot of customers. We've had a lot of success with it, and we keep improving it every time a customer comes back
And
with
each
feedback.
case is found, it gets improved, and we move
exactly.
on.
So that's the in-place migration feature. Very simple.
Right. And in this case, the apps are deleted, but they're not really deleted, right? It's just the entry in the database gets updated to point to the new ACE when it comes along from ARM. It looks like it's gone, but it's not like we're sipping it up and rehydrating it. It's just literally toggling fields in the database to point it to the new ACE.
Exactly. Nothing will be lost. Everything is copied. There's resiliency, redundancy. We're not going to lose your apps as part of this process. We have not had a customer where that has happened yet, and we're fairly confident it will not happen within the next few months while customers are still using this. So don't worry about your apps being lost. That's not a concern here. The only concern is that 1 hour or so of downtime, and ideally do this process outside of business hours, on the weekend, somewhere where you can support downtime. And this would be the process for you. Definitely start with dev or sandbox environments to make sure that you've accounted for anything that might change or anything that might go wrong that you're not familiar with. But tried and true. Same subnet, minimal networking changes.
And I think that it's like when you're doing the DNS configuration and stuff like that, the first step is adding the new IP addresses, doing the migration, but then also remembering to go back and remove the old ones, right? You don't want to leave that behind.
Right. I don't think that'll cause additional downtime unless you have something special there, but it's definitely best practice, remove any unused resources and clean up everything to the best of your abilities. That's our in-place migration option. The other option is side-by-side migration. And this is where, before you even start the migration, we ask that you create another subnet in the same VNet. This just reduces complexity when it comes to making sure that the two subnets can talk to each other. We didn't really want to deal with peering and all that. So we ask that you create the new subnet in the same virtual network. And from there, I will walk through that process. So right now you have your ACE v2 running in subnet 1, and you have empty subnet 2. You start the process by getting some new IPs. We give you those IPs, and you can do what you need to do with them. And once you start the migration, we immediately start spinning up your ACE v3. So you can see right now we have a side-by-side configuration. You have two ACEs. And just note, during this process, which does take a couple hours, you will be paying for two ACEs because of the resources. But you can minimize that charge by just completing this as quickly as possible. So the first thing we do is create your ACE v3, and you can see that all of your traffic, your application traffic, is still going to your ACE v2. The next step, and I'll just go through that again because it was quick, pay attention to the arrow from the ACE v2 front end to the ACE v2 backend and the ACE v2 backend block. What we did right there is we deleted your ACE v2 backend, and we pointed traffic from your ACE v2 front ends to your ACE v3 backend. And this is what allows us to achieve zero downtime and still, from the customer or your perspective, seem like you're running on an ACE v2 because the front ends are still ACE v2. So this is a configuration which you'll have once you complete our hybrid deployment step. And for more information on that, look at our docs. But this process takes about 3 hours. That's due to the time it takes to spin up the ACE v3 and then do this quick redirection. So at this point, the migration is paused. It's up to the customer now to start testing the ACE v3 and validate that the ACE v3 looks good. This is why this is one of the big pieces of feedback we had with the in-place migration tool is that customers wanted to be able to test their ACE v3 before deleting all their ASV2 resources. And they also wanted rollback capability just in case something went wrong. So this is your opportunity to start testing your ASV3. All the infrastructure is there. I'll just do this next little move. And you can see that we give you the IPs. So you can start pointing traffic to your ASV3 front ends, and that will point to the same ASV3 backend. And you can test the end-to-end flow with your ASV3 at this point. If something doesn't look right, if something is broken, either contact support if that's the way to resolve it, or if you feel like something is terribly wrong or you're concerned, there's an option to roll back. And if you roll back, you'll essentially just you'll trigger that and you'll get back to this state within an hour or two.
Right. And
it'll be like nothing ever happened. So yeah, so once you redirect traffic, this is all done on your side. You update your DNS and whatever you need to point traffic to the ASV3. Once you confirm this looks good, you run the final command in this side-by-side process. And what that does, it will delete the ASV2. You'll stop getting charged for the ASV2, and you'll have an empty subnet on. Your initial subnet will be empty, and your new subnet will be your new production subnet with your new ASV3. And that's it. That's for side-by-side. And as you can see, this is a zero downtime process. We only do things when you initiate it, and if you do everything correctly, this could be pretty seamless. And yeah, we don't recommend this as the #1 option, just because because you have 2 subnets, things could go wrong. But it is there for customers that can't support downtime, that want that rollback option.
Yeah, it like there's the cost benefit, right? You have a little bit more control, but you end up paying more because you end up having the multiple instances side by side.
Yeah, some customers don't need that long to do all those validations. So this could happen over the course of a day, and the charges will be insignificant. But for some customers that need a week, 2 weeks, that's where the charges start racking up. We do enforce, if you have not completed this final step where we delete the ASV2, if you haven't completed that within 14 days of starting the migration, we do automatically revert you, just because when you're in that state, we can't upgrade your ACE just in case there's a security patch that needs to roll out, or just something. We can't let you be in that state for that long. So we ask that you complete this final step in 14 days. If you need more time, open a support ticket and we'll work with you to see what we can do there.
Right. Makes sense. And then the third option is do it all by hand, right?
Third option is manual. Essentially, you would look like you would be in a situation like this. It doesn't have to be the same VNet. It could be the same VNet. You would need a new subnet because you can't have multiple ACEs in the same subnet. If you wanted to use the same subnet, you'd have to delete your ACE v2 first. And if you're doing that, I don't know why you wouldn't just use our in-place option. But for those that want to do everything manually, create the ACE v3 on your own, recreate your apps using one of our using a manual method, using backup restore, cloning. We have a whole doc dedicated to that, so that'll be linked as well once the presentation's over. But yeah, that's a fully manual process. And typically customers use the manual process when they have some sort of infrastructure as code pipeline where they've got all their resources configured and deployed using that. So it doesn't really matter to them that they don't really need the automation from us.
Right. So we do have a question from I'm going to say Petracio on Twitch, which is what's to be done by customer except initiating the migration itself. So I think you covered this a little bit, right? But you wanna repeat it?
Yeah. So it's a bit different for each of the migration options. For both of our automated options, you have to account for the new IPs because there will be IP address changes. For certain situations, the inbound IP will stay the same, but in general, pay attention to those changes. We give them to you up front, and make sure you account for those. Otherwise, you'll have extended downtime. And then, other than the initiation, side-by-side involves a couple extra steps, just because you have to tell us when you want us to do our traffic cutover, when you want us to delete resources. So just sit and watch the process and follow the guide as it walks you through it, because it's important to know what's happening, because there are a lot of things happening behind the scenes, and if things are going wrong, We have mechanisms on our side to know when things go wrong, and our engineers and support teams are on hand to step in as quickly as possible. But from your side, if you're using side-by-side migration, make sure there's no downtime. Set up a site pinger, make sure your apps are running. If you're using in place, there's really not much you can do there other than click go and wait 3 to 6 hours for it to finish. But yeah, you definitely want to keep an eye on things to make sure things are going well, especially if these are your production or critical applications.
Makes sense. Thanks for the question. So I think we covered the 3 options. You do need to plan for this because it's not just fire and forget. Depending on which route you're going, you might have either 1 hour downtime, or you might need to spend some time validating and then doing the basically finalizing the migration, which ends up cleaning up the V2 resources. And then I guess what happens if people don't do this?
Yeah, so as of August 31st, the messaging we are telling customers is that we will be deleting resources shortly after August 31st. We do have some plans and some additional communications that are going to be going out soon to give customers a bit more details about what's actually going to happen. But right now, please work towards August 31st. You really don't want to be around after that, because this is not us. This is Azure. Azure in general telling us the underlying infrastructure that our service is built on is being retired, and it's going away. So there's really nothing we can do to keep you around and help you here. So please target August 31st, and don't wait to see what happens.
Yeah, to be clear, this has been messaged for the last 3 years. We're just trying to get to those final stragglers that still have leftover resources. So yeah, if you're watching, yeah, this is talking to you directly.
Trying to get the message out there.
Yeah. Okay, if there's no more questions, I think we can wrap this up. So, as per the usual, we have the next show coming up on July 3rd. We're going to have Adrian, and he's going to be talking to us about the landing zones. If you've never heard of what a landing zone is, this is your chance, and reliable web app pattern, etc. So this is Microsoft published best practices to have a secure by default web app with all of the different components that it might be talking to, and how we get you started and in the right path using that. So that's coming up July 3rd. Please tune in, usual time, and you know where to find us. All of the links and reference material that would accompany this will be published on the App Service blog. Apart from that, we do publish there constantly. So this is coming from the actual people working on the product. So it's not just marketing fluff. It's real content. So do check it out. You can also reach us on Twitter. Again, this is just us putting out anything interesting that we see and linking to the blog, etc. Don't reach out to us for support requests. Twitter is not for support requests. We do our best to answer questions, but ultimately, if your app is down, open a support request. That's the right way to do it. So with that, I think we covered everything. Thank you so much, Jordan. Thank you, everybody that was tuning in. And for those of you watching later, thank you very much. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you very much.